wine appreciation starts with understanding grape varietals and their influence on flavor. The major red grapes include Cabernet Sauvignon, known for its bold tannins, and Pinot Noir, prized for its delicate fruitiness. White wines range from the crisp acidity of Sauvignon Blanc to the rich texture of Chardonnay. Climate plays a key role. Cooler regions like Burgundy yield wines with high acidity, while warmer regions like Napa Valley produce riper, fruitier profiles. Winemaking techniques shape taste. Oak aging adds vanilla and spice, while malolactic fermentation softens acidity. Tannins, naturally present in red wine, contribute structure and aging potential. Mastering the 5 S's of tasting, see, swirl, smell, sip, and savor, enhances appreciation by engaging the senses. Avoid common mistakes. Improper storage, incorrect serving temperature, and oxidation can all diminish wine quality. Understanding these fundamentals lays the groundwork for informed selection and pairing.
Sarah, from your experience at Les Bernardins, what foundational wine lessons do you believe resonates most with newcomers?
I do think that, all of us are hospitality professionals, and all of us are, we're people who aim to please in a lot of ways and also aim to educate. And I think that foundationally for me, from a hospitality perspective, I wanted the guests to leave happy. I wanted them to leave happier than they were when they entered. And I think when it came to specifics, Le Bernardin served primarily seafood, a lot of raw seafood, very delicately cooked seafood. Logically, a lot of people would assume that most of the pairings should be with white wines, with champagnes, with things like that. And so, but if you were a red wine drinker, my goal was always to find something that could fit. And so I think from a pairing perspective and understanding wines, I think understanding your own likes and dislikes are very, very important. Understanding your own palate is very important, because then you can ask the right questions of the hospitality professional that's trying to help you guide, using their experience and your tastes to guide you to the experience that you're going to enjoy the most. My father, for example, is pretty much exclusively a red wine drinker. So if I told him that the best pairing for something was a really crisp mineral-driven Chablis, he might agree with me, but he might not enjoy it the best. So understanding his likes and dislikes and understanding what I can do on the other side of that to help him find the best pairing that for him, I think is a really important lesson for people. Understand your own palate and what you like and don't like.
Yeah, that's a great start. I mean, even if that's just like somebody like me, I like something light and sweet.
We can work with that.
Very basic. Yeah.
That's really helpful, though, for us from a sommelier's perspective, and I know the rest of you can definitely speak to that as well. But there are a lot of people who don't either don't have the vocabulary or trust the vocabulary that they do have to be able to share that. But light and sweet, all of us can work with that.
So, Dustin, what are your thoughts? I mean, you've worked both in top restaurants and in wine retail. How do you guide somebody to start discovering their own palate and be able to communicate clearly?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Sarah said. A lot of this is so dependent on people's preferences. But my background, I come from a place where there's a lot of kind of regimented rules around how you do this stuff, and I think there is value to at least like learning those rules. Kind of the saying of you have to know the rules before you can break them, so to speak. So I think for me, there's value in at least understanding the concepts of, how food and wine pairing works and the basic foundations of what those things should be, because then it allows you to then kind of play within those environments. So kind of understanding that, intensity, I think is a big one for me, which, a really intensely flavored dish needs to have a wine that's also very intensely flavored so that they can kind of match up against each other. You wouldn't, for instance, take a peppercorn crusted ribeye steak or something like that and pair it up next to a German Riesling. You have one really low intensity wine with a really high intensity dish. It's not going to work. But so, thinking of things like that, understanding how alcohol plays with food, how tannins and acidity kind of play with food. To me, there's kind of a foundation that needs to be built on understanding those concepts. And then once you understand them, you can kind of play within them and experiment with wines that are maybe a little bit more in tune with your personal preferences.
Yannick, can you share? I mean, you come from a French family. Tell us how enjoying wine can actually elevate the food on the table.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that I think wine, compared to a lot of other beverages, has this incredible way to kind of transport you into a moment, to a place, especially based on the nose and the aromas. And that's what makes it so unique. Going back to how to kind of describe wine to somebody who's just getting into it or trying to get them to really enjoy the world of wine, I think you have to kind of take everyone case by case. And I always like to try to understand someone's background, because if someone grew up, in Southeast Asia, their perception of what sugar and what's high acid and what's dry will be very different compared to somebody who grew up in, let's say, a Nordic country, right? Based on the ingredients and how they grew up with culturally. So I think that's really important. So I always kind of we'll start off, asking people, what do you drink in the morning? What kind of coffee? Do you just have black ristretto espresso with no sugar, or do you have like a cappuccino and then you dump a bunch of sugar in it? So that kind of gives me a gauge on how to, what kind of wines or what kind of countries or grapes to really kind of present to them. And that's how I go about that as well. So I think there's a combination of what Dustin is saying. Definitely these rules are really important as a reference and a benchmark, and they're incredibly important. And then it's really up to you to kind of make it your own as well.
I like that. I like that you're trying to put the puzzle pieces together by talking to somebody. And I assume that that's also how you help make wine and education more accessible to diverse audiences too.
Exactly.
So Madeline, in your journey with Wine Folly, what's one common misconception about wine varietals that you've encountered, and how do you address it?
Well, varieties, I think that we have this core list of the noble grapes and that everything else is just garbage, but that's not true. There's so many amazing grapes out there that have staying power. They can age incredibly well. We just don't know about them. There's more than 1,300 grape varieties that are commercially viable currently in the world that grow in various amounts in various places, and some of them are quite rare. That are quite a find. So I would say misconceptions are that there's just a few out there. And I think that's what makes wine so complicated, is because you're like, well, once I know one I like, I can stick to it and it's good. But there might be many that you like a lot. But getting back to the palate thing, I used to work with a friend of mine. His sister had just been pregnant, had a baby. And I was pretty sure she had a super palate. And we have this idea that you're supposed to have a good palate in order to love wine. And that's not exactly true, because I remember going over to her house and I had a whole swath of different types of wine. And I was like, she's like, I hate wine. And I'm like, I am going to find the one that you like. And she's one of those people who basically likes a little bit of coffee in her cream. And she is very picky about her food. She hates Brussels sprouts. She hates broccoli. She doesn't like kale or anything like that. She's on this mostly cream-based diet, in my opinion, cream and chicken and very little salt. She has an incredibly sensitive palate. So I remember tasting her on a bunch of different wines, and they all tasted sour and they were grapes that had gone bad. And I found this one with very low alcohol, and it was sweet. It was a Moscato d'Asti. You guys know what I'm talking about. And she was like, this one is the least sucky of all the wines. So I think this idea of knowing your palate is very individual. And I'm glad that she was semi-okay with the Moscato d'Asti, but you're going to start somewhere, and wherever you start is a-okay with the pros. It's the people in between the pros, and Dustin will, whatever, pick on Dustin because he's a master sommelier. It's the people in between that are going to make you have a bad time, because they're like, Moscato d'Asti isn't a good wine to like. You like a garbage wine, and that's not true. That's just foundationally not true. So, and comment.
I'm
Hardly
relieved.
agree.
I thought you were going to say that you had to put half and half in her wine.
Oh God, that's an amazing idea. I should have tried that. No, I didn't, but I did used to think that wine smelled like baby diaper. And, you know, a really funky Chardonnay from Burgundy often has this like aroma. And she had some fresh baby diapers, and I have since proven that that is not true. Absolutely not true. There is no wine that smells like baby diaper. It's not true. It's
A true A/B test. They required a true A/B test. So maybe I'll just go around the panel quickly. When guiding someone new to wine, what's the first aspect you focus on to help build a foundational understanding? Start with Madeline, since you were talking.
Oh gosh, a foundational understanding. I want you to try at least 4 different wines to understand the range that is out there. A white, sparkling, a light red, and a bold red. Basically, that's kind of like there's a little bit more outside of that range, but you should kind of know what tannin feels like on your palate and how to taste that. And you sort of develop this like, oh, I see what you guys are talking about. And if you go to any wine store and have this decent, anyone who's a wine steward is going to set you into the right bottle. Maybe a sweet wine. One of them could be sweet. That's okay. Just so you can taste the range that's out there. And the goal is to know what the whole thing is all about, and also tune your palate on what's acidity taste like, what does tannin taste like, what is sweetness in a wine, what is body. We talk about intensity, like matching an intense wine with an intense flavored food. You need to know what the range is that's out there that you're working with. And that's one of the things that a lot of great wine educators will do is they'll set you up with about 9 or 10 wines, and you'll taste the rainbow, and you'll develop like so much understanding in that moment.
Reference points. Sarah, your thought?
Yeah, I was going to say comparative tasting is really, really helpful. I often, my parents are retired in a community of their friends in Orlando, and sometimes I set up wine tastings for them. And there was a whole crew of them that was like, "Oh, I hate Chardonnay," and but you know, as Madeline was saying, like one expression of one grape varies, as we know, across the world in so many different styles and so many different ways. And so I asked if they'd be open to testing that theory. And we did comparative tastings of Chardonnays from all over the world. And, you know, that I think, you know, drawing on some of the stuff that Yannick and Madeline said as well, asking them to compare it to some of the stuff that they like and don't like in other foods and drinks, asking them to notice per wine, not knowing where they were from, what it was about each one that reminded them of something else that they've had, or what they liked, what they didn't like, how it made them feel afterwards. Like there are a bunch of different questions. And I think that comparative tasting of either the same variety, like you could do it in a bunch of different ways. You can do the same varietal. You could do 6 different styles and see like what of different varietals even, and see what it is that's speaking to you. And then being able to remember that and relay it to a wine professional, whether they're in a store, whether they're in the restaurant, whatever, is, again, it's like I was saying earlier about knowing your own likes and dislikes. It's just giving you that framework it's giving you your own framework to be able to let one of us translate for you what we like, use that to guide you to something you're really going to enjoy. Because again, our job is to get you something you're really going to enjoy, but hopefully also guide you to something that's we consider a great option for whatever you're doing, whether it's in a store or at a restaurant, and also educate you a little bit.
Hopefully a win-win. Yannick?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially here in the New York City market, we have an abundance of really great wine bars. Going to a restaurant or an establishment that has a big selection of wines by the glass, and there's nothing wrong with going up there and saying, "Hey, I'm just getting into wine. I'm learning about this. I really want to explore. I'm not familiar with this weird grape called Zino Mavro. I see you have it. Can I get a little taste of it?" And more than likely, you will get a sample of that. And I think that's really a great way to kind of just explore and see what's out there. Or even just going up to the bartender, the sommelier, the waiter, and saying, "Hey, instead of getting, buying one glass, can you do a split or something?" And that's really a great way to explore, because, going to a wine store and committing to buying 4 bottles of wine, it could be quite a lot, right? It's not cheap, but we all know that. We all understand that. But I think taking that step and that active approach is really great. And And there's nothing wrong with showing a bit of vulnerability and just saying, hey, I'm not an expert. Show me the way, show me the path.
I love it. And Justin? Oh, you're muted, Dustin.
Sorry, I'm unmuted. Yeah, just kind of building on this, I think it really is about starting to understand your own preferences and your own palate, and being able to start to develop a vocabulary on how to communicate your preferences. And really the best way to do that is to just taste lots and lots of different things. Whether it's going to wine bars or, look at local wine tastings that are happening in your areas, going to a retail shop that's putting on a tasting, things of that nature, where you can just try stuff. And you want to do that, as much of that as possible. And I think, wine is one of these weird things that everybody seems to be, especially when they're first getting into it, really afraid to look like you don't know what you're doing, or like you don't have the vocabulary and it makes you feel dumb. And I think, just kind of having the confidence to just be okay with that and just push through it, because we all started somewhere. My first wine book was literally Wine for Dummies. So, I think it's about having that ability to kind of push through that fear a little bit, as Yannick was mentioning, and just get out there and try a lot of things. And then when you try things and you find that you like something, just write it down, take a picture of it. You don't need to say what it was necessarily that you like specifically about it. You don't need to say, oh, I liked these flavors of, blueberry or raspberry or whatever it is. Say, I liked this wine. Write down what it was. Was it a Malbec? Was it a Cabernet? Was it a Pinot Noir? Was it, take a picture of the bottle. Because then you come to one of us and you show it to us, like, the last time I went out and tasted a bunch of things, I liked this thing. We're like, great, because then we can take that and say, okay, just from seeing that wine or what it was, we can start to develop a kind of a broad stroke of different things that we could recommend to you that are going to be pretty similar in style that you're most likely going to enjoy. And then from there, once you find like that one thing that you do really like, dive deep into it, figure out, okay, where does this wine come from? Read about it a little bit. What is this grape all about? Where else is it grown? Should I go try this same grape from other places around the world? And that's where that sense of discovery really starts to happen. So I think it really is about kind of learning yourself and getting past that fear as the first step.
I love it. A great starting point. Let's go to segment 2.